He said, "I think we should just be friends. My ex needs me more." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. The words hung in the cool night air of the parking lot behind Daniel's apartment building, fragile and unreal, as if they had not fully decided to break apart my life yet. I was standing beside my car with one hand in my jacket pocket. Inside that pocket was a small metal key. A car key. Not to my car, to a modest silver sedan Daniel had admired months earlier when we were driving through town. "Maybe one day," he had said with a half smile, "when life gets a little more stable." I had remembered. Photographers remember the details other people let drift away. A passing comment, a look, the way someone's face changes when they think no one is paying attention. And now I was watching Daniel Brooks look at me with a strange mixture of guilt and relief, like a man finishing a speech he had been rehearsing in private for days. "My name is Ava Carter. I'm 29 years old, and that was the night I learned heartbreak does not always feel like breaking. Sometimes it feels like clarity." Daniel shifted awkwardly and rubbed the back of his neck. "I just think it's the right thing," he said. "Sophie's going through a lot right now." Sophie, his ex-girlfriend, the woman who had drifted back into our lives so quietly that, by the time I fully noticed her, the damage was already underway. For a moment, I simply studied him. His brown hair was slightly messy. His button-down shirt looked wrinkled, like he had been pacing before I arrived. But what stood out most was the look in his eyes. Relief. Not regret, not conflict, relief. I pressed my fingers around the cold edge of the key in my pocket. I had spent months saving, then taken extra assignments for weeks to cover the final payment on that car. I had bought it under my own name and kept it in a rented garage until our anniversary. A surprise for a future he had already started abandoning. I looked him in the eye. "All right," I said quietly. "I hope you're happy." He blinked, confused. Maybe he had expected tears, questions, anger. Instead, I stepped into my car, started the engine, and drove away. I did not look back. And the strangest part was this. I felt calm. Not because I was numb, because some part of me had been bracing for this for weeks. Daniel and I had been together for 3 years. I'm a freelance photographer, the real kind, not the glamorous version people imagine. Early trains, cheap motels, long drives, thousands of frames to find one honest image. Daniel was an accountant, structured, careful, and deeply attached to order. He color-coded spreadsheets, planned weeks in advance, and liked to believe life could be managed if you were disciplined enough. For a long time, we fit together well enough to make that feel like balance. I was more intuitive. He was more controlled. I worked in changing light. He trusted numbers. We told ourselves that made us stronger together. And for a while, maybe it did. We did not fight much. Not about money, not about trust, not about the future. The relationship felt steady in the way comfortable things often do. So steady, in fact, that you stop examining it too closely. Then Sophie came back. Daniel told me the first time she contacted him while we were at our favorite diner, a place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that never quite tasted fresh. "She messaged me today," he said, stirring sugar into his cup. "Sophie?" "Yeah." He shrugged too casually. "She says she's changed, got her life together." I looked at him for a moment. And nothing, we just talked. At the time, I believed him. Not because I was naive, because Daniel had always seemed straightforward, almost painfully so. He was not charming enough to be good at lying, or at least that was what I had believed. Over the next few weeks, Sophie started appearing more often in conversation. She asked me for advice about a job. She's trying to rebuild her credit. She's thinking about starting a business. Each mention was mild on its own. Together they formed a pattern I did not like. Daniel talked about her the way some people talk about a crisis they feel personally responsible for solving, not with love exactly, with involvement. That was when I started paying closer attention. The first real crack came one night at the diner. Same booth, same bad coffee, same effort at normalcy. Daniel's phone lit up on the table. I only caught the message for a second before he snatched the phone away. "Sophie, dinner tonight? Need to talk." He moved too fast, too carefully. I did not say anything. I just took another bite of my burger and let the silence sit between us. Inside, something settled into place. Not panic, recognition. Around that same time, I had started planning the anniversary surprise. The car. Nothing flashy, just practical, reliable, and useful. Exactly the sort of thing Daniel used to admire. I wanted to make his life easier. I wanted to give him something solid. Funny how easily you can keep building a future for someone who has already started stepping out of it. The night everything ended, Daniel called and asked if I could come over. "We should talk," he said. His voice sounded calm in the way people sound when they have already decided what they want and only need you to hear it. By the time I got to the parking lot behind his building, I already knew. Then he said it anyway. I think we should just be friends. My ex needs me more. No shouting, no mess, no honesty beyond the bare minimum. He was not leaving because he had no choice. He was leaving because chaos had started to look more exciting than stability. So I gave him the only response he had not prepared for. I wished him happiness. Then I drove home and waited for grief to hit. It didn't. Instead, my life became unexpectedly quiet. For weeks after the breakup, I kept expecting some dramatic collapse. A sleepless night, a breakdown in the middle of editing, tears in a grocery store parking lot. Nothing like that came. What came instead was sleep, focus, relief. It turned out I had been carrying more tension than I realized. Once Daniel was gone, I stopped spending energy pretending not to notice what was already obvious. So I worked. I took every assignment I could get. Travel pieces, portrait sessions, local festivals, storm fronts over farmland, a fisherman mending nets at dawn, an elderly woman in a laundromat folding tiny socks with reverent care. I photographed things that stayed where they were, things that did not shift the moment you trusted them. The work got better, quieter, cleaner, less eager to impress. A few months later, a small gallery in Portland reached out after seeing a coastal series I had posted online. Fog over cliffs, a roadside diner, a woman in a raincoat staring out at black water. The owner asked whether I had enough material for a small exhibit. I almost said no, not because I doubted the work, but because saying yes meant admitting that my life had continued after Daniel, that something worthwhile had grown in the space he left behind. In the end, I agreed. The exhibit was called Stillness. The opening night was cold and damp, the kind of Portland evening that made the streetlights look lonely. I wore a black coat and low heels, and kept reminding myself I was there as a professional, not as a woman, proving she had survived something. The gallery smelled faintly of white paint, wine, and rain-soaked wool. People moved slowly from frame to frame, speaking in soft voices. One couple stood in front of a photograph of a motel window glowing gold against a storm-dark parking lot and stared at it for nearly 3 minutes without speaking. That mattered more than compliments. Later, the owner walked over with a clipboard and a surprised smile. 3 red dots already, he said. I blinked. What? Sold. By the end of the week, the exhibit had sold out. People congratulated me. Old friends resurfaced. Mutual acquaintances who had been silent for months suddenly remembered I existed. That was when Daniel's name started drifting back into conversations. Not directly at first, always sideways. I saw Daniel recently. He's with Sophie now. She seems intense. Or my least favorite. Well, at least everything happens for a reason. I hated that phrase. Most things do not happen for a reason. Most things happen because people make selfish choices and later try to rename the consequences. I never said that aloud. I just let the conversation move on. But the updates kept coming. Daniel and Sophie were serious. Sophie had some new business venture. Sophie knew investors. Sophie was helping Daniel think bigger. That phrase almost made me laugh. As if stability were small-minded. As if reliability were somehow less valuable than risk wrapped in confidence. Then the story shifted. The first real warning came from a friend of a friend who had once worked with Sophie on some startup that never fully existed outside presentations and promises. She's all talk, he said over dinner one night. Nothing she touches ever actually finishes. I said nothing. He kept going. Apparently, Sophie had a pattern. New city, new people, new plans, big promises with no real foundation underneath them. After that, more pieces surfaced. Investor problems, unpaid loans, credit cards opened under someone else's name, a shared office she supposedly helped fund, then vanished from. The exact details changed depending on who was telling the story, but the shape stayed the same. Sophie was unstable, financially reckless, and always one step ahead of accountability. Before long, Daniel's name started appearing in those same conversations. He was covering bills, then debts, then helping her through a rough patch, then missing work, then looking exhausted. Someone said he had drained part of his savings. Someone else said the financial damage was worse than he had realized. I did not know which details were true, but I knew the overall pattern. Daniel was sinking and Sophie was tied to him. One evening after a portrait session, I stopped by the grocery store near my apartment. I was in the produce section trying to decide whether 2 avocados were worth the risk when I heard my name. I turned and found Marissa, one of those mutual friends who always knew too much. Ava, she said softly, have you heard? Probably not. She stepped closer and lowered her voice, even though no one around us was listening. Daniel's in trouble. I waited. Sophie lost her apartment. He's been paying for everything. There were debt collectors at his office, and... She hesitated. People are saying things are getting ugly. What kind of ugly? Marissa looked uncomfortable. Bad fights. Public scenes. Toxic, basically. Nobody seems stable. I put the avocados back. Months earlier, Daniel had stood in a parking lot and told me Sophie needed him more. Now apparently he was buried under the weight of that need. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. Marissa studied my face, clearly hoping for a stronger reaction. Are you okay? She asked. The question almost amused me. Why wouldn't I be? She flushed. I just thought, after everything. After everything. Another one of those vague phrases people use when the truth feels too blunt. I gave her a small smile. I'm fine. Then I changed the subject. That night, back home, I edited until midnight. A field at dawn. A child asleep against her mother's shoulder on a ferry. Rain-darkened cabins lined up beneath a gray sky. At some point, I leaned back and realized I had not thought about Daniel once while I was working. That felt important. Not dramatic, just important. A few weeks later, I accepted a travel feature assignment in Oregon. It was the kind of project I usually loved. Small towns, back roads, local detail, shifting weather, places that looked like memories while you were still inside them. I did not know then that the trip would change my life. I only knew I needed the work. And somewhere in Oregon, waiting beyond deadlines and camera batteries and coffee-stained notebooks, was the next chapter of my story. His name was Noah Bennett. The assignment was simple on paper. 3 towns along the coast, a feature about the places tourists usually drove past without noticing. Quiet harbors, weathered diners, fog over cliffs. The magazine sent me the editor's contact information. Noah Bennett. We exchanged a few emails before I left. His messages were short, direct, and slightly sarcastic. One line in particular stayed with me. Send photos that actually tell the truth about the place, not the ones that make tourists feel comfortable. I liked that immediately. Most travel magazines wanted polished lies. Noah, apparently, preferred something real. I met him 3 days later in a cafe overlooking the harbor in Astoria. The cafe smelled like espresso and wet wool. The ocean beyond the window looked metallic under a pale gray sky. Noah was already there when I arrived. Tall, dark hair, slightly messy, a worn leather notebook beside a laptop covered in travel stickers. He looked exactly like someone who spent more time reading other people's work than worrying about how he appeared. He glanced up as I approached. You're Ava Carter. Not a question. I set my camera bag down beside the chair across from him. That obvious? He looked me over once and shrugged. You walk like someone carrying expensive equipment. That made me laugh. A real laugh. One that arrived without effort. He nodded toward my camera. Is that the same model from your Portland exhibit? I blinked. You saw that? I research people I work with, he said matter-of-factly. Your series Stillness. The motel window photo was good. Good. Not brilliant, not beautiful, just good. Oddly, I appreciated that more. I sat down and ordered coffee. So, I said, you're the editor who hates comfortable travel photos. I hate dishonest ones, Noah replied. Comfort just happens to be dishonest a lot of the time. He tapped the table lightly. Most travel writing lies. It pretends every town is charming and every sunset is meaningful. Most places are just real, ordinary, complicated. That's exactly why I photographed them, I said. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then Noah leaned back. Good, he said. Then this assignment might actually work. The week developed its own rhythm. Drive, photograph, edit. Meet Noah at whatever cafe or diner had decent coffee and functioning Wi-Fi. He reviewed captions while I sorted memory cards. We argued occasionally, but only in the way people argue when they both care about the work. You're using too many adjectives, I told him once, reading a paragraph he had written about a fishing pier. It's travel writing, he said. Adjectives are part of the ecosystem. You used the word timeless twice in one sentence. That was intentional. That was lazy. He stared at me for a second, then smiled. Fine. You remove one adjective from your captions for every one I remove from the article. Deal. Somewhere in those long days of rain, coffee, and coastline, something unexpected took shape. Not romance, not yet. Just ease. Noah never asked about my past, never asked about Daniel, never treated my silence like a problem he needed to solve. He treated me the same way he treated the work, with attention, honesty, and enough respect to leave room where room was needed. One evening after shooting near Cannon Beach, we stopped at a roadside diner with faded red booths and a jukebox that had probably been broken for 20 years. I dropped my camera bag beside the table and stretched my shoulders. Noah watched me for a moment. "You carry that thing like it's part of your spine." "It practically is." He nodded toward the camera. "That model's old." "Reliable," I corrected. He tilted his head. "That camera has probably seen more life than most people." I laughed. Again, easily. The days kept going like that. More work, more coffee, longer conversations, quiet drives that did not need to be filled. One night we stayed up late reviewing photos in a motel room while rain tapped softly against the window. Noah leaned over a picture of a lighthouse struck by a sudden break of sunlight. "This one," he said. "Too obvious," I replied. He looked at me. "Why?" I pointed to the lower corner of the frame. "Because the lighthouse isn't the real subject. That fisherman on the rocks is." He studied it again, then nodded. "You're right." He looked up at me. "You notice what most people miss." I gave a small shrug. "Occupational hazard." He smiled. And somewhere between those conversations and those long gray drives, a realization settled quietly inside me. I did not miss Daniel. Not the real Daniel. The person I had missed for a while was a version of him I had created. Someone steadier, kinder, more loyal than he actually was. Once that illusion was gone, there was not much left to mourn. The Oregon assignment ended 2 weeks later. The article was finished. The photos were uploaded. The magazine editor sent an enthusiastic email about the final package. Noah and I met one last time before I drove home. Same cafe, same gray sky, same harbor. He closed his laptop and leaned back. "Well," he said, "that worked better than expected." "I'll take that as high praise." "It is." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, almost casually, "You'll probably be back out here again." "Probably." He nodded toward my camera. "Good." "Why?" "Because I like working with photographers who argue with me." I smiled. "Careful. That might encourage me." "I'm counting on it." 2 days later, I was back in my apartment. Back to editing, emails, laundry, ordinary life. Then one evening, while sorting a new batch of photos, my phone buzzed. Daniel. I had not seen his name on my screen in months. The message preview glowed softly. "Ava, I know I messed up." For a long moment, I just looked at it. My chest did not tighten. My hands did not shake. I opened the message. "Ava, I know I messed up. Sophie lied about everything. She ruined my finances. I tried to help her, and it destroyed everything I built. She's gone now. I lost my job, my savings, everything. But I know you still care about me. Please, can we talk?" I read it once, then again. What I felt was not anger. It was distance, like I was reading a message meant for someone I used to be. My apartment was quiet. The room smelled faintly of coffee and rain through the cracked window. Framed prints from the Portland exhibit lined the wall. My camera rested beside a half-finished cup. This was my life now. Daniel's message belonged to another timeline. I considered ignoring it, blocking the number without reply, letting silence do the work. But something in me wanted one clean sentence, not for him, for myself. So I typed carefully. "I used to love you." I looked at the words for a second, then finished. "But the person I loved doesn't exist anymore." I sent it. The message delivered instantly. 3 dots appeared. Daniel started typing. I did not wait. I opened the contact menu, pressed block number, and set the phone face down on the table. No argument, no reopening of old doors, no second version of the same mistake. Sometimes closure is not a conversation. Sometimes it is a decision. 3 months passed after that message. 3 quiet months. The kind of quiet that doesn't arrive dramatically. It just settles into the corners of your life until one day you notice you are breathing easier. Noah and I kept working together. More assignments. More editing sessions in cafes, hotel lobbies, and sometimes the backseat of my car when deadlines were too close and the nearest workspace was a highway overlook. Somewhere along the way, the rhythm of our partnership shifted. The teasing softened. The silences became comfortable. One evening, after a long editing session, we ended up at my apartment because the cafe we had been working in closed early. Noah dropped onto the couch with a tired groan. I think my brain just filed a formal complaint. Against what? Adjectives. I laughed and tossed him a bottle of water. "You're the one who keeps using them." Professional hazard. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes for a moment. The room was dim except for the soft glow of my editing monitor. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. "You're calmer than most photographers I know," he said after a moment. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." I adjusted the contrast on a photo and shrugged. "Maybe I've just seen enough chaos." "That sounds like a story." Not a very interesting one. He studied me for a second, then nodded. Fair. And that was it. He didn't push. He didn't pry. For the first time in a long while, I noticed how rare that kind of restraint was. The night everything finally resurfaced was a Tuesday. Late. Noah had fallen asleep on my couch with a paperback open on his chest while reviewing captions. I was still at my desk editing photos when the first bang hit the front door. Loud. Sharp. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. Then it came again. Bang. Noah stirred. I glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Probably a drunk neighbor. Then the pounding started again. Harder. And someone shouted, Ava! My body went still. The voice was hoarse and strained, but unmistakable. Open the door. Noah sat up, confused. What's going on? Another slam shook the door. You coward, the voice yelled. I know you're in there. Noah rubbed his eyes and looked toward the hallway. You know that voice? Yes. Outside the door, the shouting continued. Ava, stop hiding. Noah stood up now, fully awake. Who is that? I took a slow breath. Daniel. The pounding returned, louder this time. Come on, Ava. Let people see who you really are. Noah frowned. People? I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. What I saw made my stomach sink. Daniel stood on the porch, soaked by rain, eyes wild. And behind him, 3 strangers, 2 women and a man, all holding their phones up, recording. For a second, I simply stared. Behind me, Noah spoke quietly. Please tell me that's not what it looks like. It's worse, I said. Another bang rattled the door. Ava, Daniel shouted. You ruined my life. Noah glanced at me. What do you want to do? I reached for the lock. I'm not hiding from this. The door opened. Cold rain blew across the porch. Daniel stood there breathing hard, his clothes soaked and his expression tight with anger and exhaustion. Behind him, the strangers kept their phones raised. Tiny red recording lights blinked. Daniel pointed at me the moment the door opened. There she is. One of the women whispered behind him. Keep filming. I felt Noah move quietly beside me. Daniel stepped forward. You left me, he said. The accusation hung in the air. You showed up at my door in the middle of the night, I replied calmly, with strangers recording. Daniel let out a sharp laugh. Of course they're recording. People should see what kind of person you are. The man with the phone zoomed in slightly. This was a performance. Daniel had not come here for a conversation. He had come to create a story. And in that story, I was supposed to be the villain. Noah spoke beside me. I'm calling the police. Daniel snapped his head toward him. Who are you? Someone telling you to leave? Daniel looked back at me. Oh, he said slowly. I see how it is. His gaze flicked toward Noah again. So this is the replacement? Neither of us responded. The rain kept falling. The phones kept recording. Daniel's voice rose. You think you're better than me now? He shouted. Posting your happy little life online while I'm out there drowning? You're not drowning because of me, I said. Oh, really? His finger jabbed toward me. You abandoned me when everything started collapsing. I looked at him steadily. You chose her. For a moment, his anger faltered. Then it came back stronger. You think you're innocent in all this? He yelled. You broke me, Ava. One of the people filming shifted behind him. Say that again, she whispered. Daniel repeated it louder. You broke me. Something inside me settled. Not anger, just clarity. Daniel didn't want understanding. He wanted someone else to carry the consequences of his choices. And tonight, he had decided that person should be me. I stepped slightly forward. You weren't abandoned, I said calmly. He blinked. You abandoned yourself the moment you chose lies over truth. The porch went quiet. Even the phone seemed to pause. Daniel's expression twisted. You always thought you were smarter than everyone, he snapped. Then he shoved forward, not hard enough to knock me down, but enough to push into the doorway. Noah moved instantly. He stepped between us and held his arm out, stopping Daniel from coming inside. That's enough. Daniel's chest rose and fell rapidly. You're all the same, he spat. You pretend to be calm while you destroy people. From Noah's pocket came the faint sound of a voice. The call was still active. Then distant sirens cut through the rain. The group filming stiffened. Red and blue lights appeared down the street seconds later. 2 patrol cars pulled up. The officers stepped out quickly. What's going on here? One asked. Daniel immediately started talking. She ruined my life. I stepped slightly aside. Officer, I said, everything that just happened is on my door camera. The officer glanced at the phones, then at Daniel. Sir, step back from the doorway. Daniel hesitated. The officer didn't repeat himself. Slowly, Daniel stepped down from the porch. The second officer approached the people filming. Phones down. One of them protested weakly. We're documenting. You're interfering with a disturbance call. The phones lowered. Daniel's shoulders sagged. Without an audience, the performance seemed to drain out of him. The officer reviewed the footage from my phone. Then he turned back to Daniel. You need to leave. Daniel's eyes widened. You don't understand. If you return here, the officer said evenly, it will be considered trespassing. Daniel looked at me. For the first time that night, the anger cracked. You'll regret this, he said hoarsely. You'll regret not saving me. The officers guided him toward the street. Rain soaked through his shirt as he twisted around one last time. Ava! I didn't answer. Minutes later, the patrol cars drove away. The street fell quiet again. Inside, Noah exhaled slowly. Well, he said, that was something. I closed the door and locked it. For a moment, I stood in the hallway listening to the rain. You okay? Noah asked. I thought about the parking lot months earlier, the key in my pocket, the life I thought I was building. Then I nodded. Yeah, I said softly. I think I actually am. After that night, the chaos finally ended. Not instantly, but it faded. A short clip of Danielle shouting in the rain appeared online for a few days, but without context, it just looked like a man losing control on someone's porch. Most people ignored it. Daniel had wanted an audience. Instead, he got indifference. Life moved on. A few weeks later, Noah and I made a decision that felt less like a leap and more like the next natural step. We left the city. No speeches. No dramatic declarations. We simply packed what we needed and drove west. The Oregon coast had stayed with me ever since that first assignment. Fog drifting through cliffs. Gray water stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Quiet towns where life moves slower. We found a small place along Highway 101. One grocery store. 2 cafes. A bookstore that smelled like salt and old paper. A harbor where fishing boats rocked gently against wooden docks. It was simple, which made it perfect. I rented a small storefront near the water and turned it into a photography studio. White walls, wide windows, natural light across wooden floors. Most of my work there wasn't commercial. I photographed fishermen with weathered hands, children flying kites along the beach, storm clouds rolling over the ocean. Sometimes tourists came in, sometimes they didn't. Either way, the studio paid the bills. And that was enough. Noah kept writing. Sometimes at the cafe down the street, sometimes at the desk beside my studio window, sometimes in the passenger seat of the car while we drove the coastline looking for stories. We worked quietly together. Morning coffee, deadlines, walks along the beach. Months passed. One spring morning, I was cleaning a desk drawer in the studio when my fingers touched something cold. Metal. I pulled it out. The car key, still on its silver ring. The memory returned instantly. The parking lot. Daniel's voice. The surprise that never happened. The silver sedan that had been sitting for months in the rented garage under my name. Behind me, the door opened. Noah stepped inside with 2 cups of coffee. He noticed the key. What's that? An unfinished story, I said. He set the coffee down. I told him the short version. The anniversary gift. The breakup. The car that had never been given. When I finished, he asked quietly, So what are you going to do with it? I turned the key in my fingers. Once it had represented a future that vanished. Now it felt like something else. A different beginning, I said. Noah smiled. That evening, we drove the car along Highway 101. The ocean stretched beside us. The sky turned gold as the sun sank toward the horizon. After a while, Noah glanced at me. Do you ever think about him? I knew who he meant. I considered the question carefully. Then I shook my head. Not really. He waited. I think about who I used to be, I said. The person who thought love meant fixing someone else's mistakes. I looked out at the water, and how far I've come from that. Noah reached across the console and laced his fingers through mine. The road curved ahead of us. Open. Daniel disappeared from my life after that night. Debt problems. Another failed relationship. His social media accounts vanished. Some people blamed Sophie. Some blamed bad luck. I didn't think about it much. Not because I hated him. Not because I forgave him. But because his story had finally stopped intersecting with mine. One night, locking up the studio, Noah asked something quietly. Do you think letting go is weakness? I looked out at the dark ocean beyond the harbor lights. No, I said. Sometimes letting go is the only way to keep your dignity. He nodded. And together we walked home through the quiet coastal street while the waves rolled in, somewhere beyond the dark. For the first time in years, the noise was gone, and peace felt permanent.